So Marjorie Taylor Greene offends me. She truly does. I know we all had a good laugh at her expense when Jasmine Crockett called her the bleach blonde, bad-built butch body. I wrote a song about it that went viral. And I've written a lot of songs about a lot of political figures that are satirical type tunes, and they've done really well, but that one is definitely now my most viewed song of all time. It's close to 7 million views, and so that one is definitely the one that I'll probably be remembered for. And I have no problem with that, because if I could take part in roasting such a vile, disgusting, despicable human being, then that's totally the hill I'm willing to die on. I'm good with it. But all jokes aside, and all funny songs aside, she deeply offends me. Not only is the way she carries herself as a United States Congresswoman, but the way she carries herself as a human being, the way she treats others. And to be honest with you folks, I wrestled with whether or not I was going to play this clip. Part of me says, don't even give her the time of day. The other part of me says, I want to show you her temperament, and I want to show you Dr. Fauci's temperament, and I want to make it clear that I'm not undecided on which side of the aisle I fall on. I lean to the left. I vote Democratic. I'm going to for the foreseeable future, and it's because of the likes of Marjorie Taylor Greene. Marjorie Taylor Greene is why I can't tell you I'm independent. Marjorie Taylor Greene is why I can't tell you I'm undecided. She's one of the biggest reasons why I want everyone to know that I am as far away from her politically as you could possibly be in this universe. I do not stand for anything she stands for. I don't agree with her on anything. If she told me the grass was green, I wouldn't believe her. Okay, so let it be known that Brando in no way agrees with her at all, nor do I condone her vile and despicable behavior towards Dr. Fauci. But I want to show it to you just so then I can show you Dr. Fauci and show you a vile, disgusting human being, and then turn around and show you Dr. Fauci, a good man. So let's roll this despicable clip.
You think that's appropriate? Do the American people deserve to be abused like that, Mr. Fauci? Because you're not doctor. You're Mr. Fauci in my few minutes. No, I don't need your answer. I want to talk about this right here.
Mr. Chairman,
Fauci,
objection.
I reclaim my time.
Objection.
I reclaim my time. I reclaim my time, Mr. Raskin.
Gentlelady will suspend.
Mr. Chairman,
Point of order.
just in terms of the rules of decorum, are we allowed to deny that a doctor is a doctor just because we don't want him to be a doctor?
Yes, because in my time, that man does not deserve to have a license. As a matter of fact, it should be revoked, and he belongs in
Gentlelady
prison.
will suspend. The gentlelady should recognize the doctor as a doctor.
You know, both of my grandfathers were Republican, and one of them fought in World War II. And I remember him telling me one time that he didn't vote for Kennedy, but he cried the day that Kennedy was assassinated. And he said he did so because it was just such a terrible thing for our country, and because he didn't agree with Kennedy on politics, but he knew Kennedy was a good person, and he knew he meant well, and he knew he loved the country. And so this diehard Republican who fought for his country still shed a tear over a Democratic president. That's what the Republican Party used to be. And now they're filled with that type of vile, disgusting shit. She's such an embarrassment to us all. She truly is, not just to Georgia. I started to say to Georgia, but she's an embarrassment to us all, because people are watching from all over the world and they're seeing that type of behavior. And she clearly doesn't want to make the problem better. She clearly doesn't want to address things. All she wants to really do is muddy the water, stir the pot, and get people worked into a frenzy. And if she's ever been successful at anything, that's all she's good at, is muddying the water and getting a bunch of uneducated idiots worked up. But in this next clip, we're going to hear from Dr. Fauci. And I want you to listen to him and what he has to say here, because he talks about how in all the years he's done this, he's never been talked to like that, and how that, you know, Marjorie Taylor Greene doesn't want to fix the problem at the end of the day. Take a look at this.
You know, Caitlin, thank you for having me. I have testified literally hundreds of times over the last 40 years over Congress, and there's always been differences of opinion, differences of ideology, criticisms, and things like that. But the level of vitriol that we see now, just in the country in general, but actually played out during this hearing, was really quite unfortunate, because the purpose of hearings are to try and figure out how we can do better so that next time, if and when we are faced with a pandemic, we'd be better prepared and we could benefit if mistakes were made, we identify them, and we try to correct them for the future. That's not what we saw today, as shown by the clip you showed with Marjorie Taylor Greene. I mean, that was nothing about trying to do better, unfortunately.
And
You know, folks, back when the pandemic started, my main concern was, how are we going to get out of this? How are we going to save as many lives as we can? How are we going to work together for the better of everybody? And how are we going to get through it? I was never concerned with where it came from. I was never concerned with all the conspiracy theories that started popping up. None of those things meant anything to me, because I realized people were dying, and I realized we needed to do something to put a stop to it. And I was reminded of an old Buddhist parable that I once read, and I know I'm paraphrasing, but it said that there was a man who got shot by a poisonous arrow. He began to question where the arrow came from. He wanted to know who shot the arrow. He wanted to know what the arrow was made out of, what type of wood it was made out of, you know. He questioned everything about the arrow, and questioned all of those things till he died. And the moral of the story is, it doesn't matter where it came from. What matters is you have to deal with the problem, and you have to deal with the hand that you've been dealt right here and now. And that's how I felt through the whole pandemic. So when I worked with folks that threw conspiracy theories at me, I heard it came from here, I heard it came from there, I heard this guy was behind it, that guy was behind it, blah, blah, blah. None of that mattered. What mattered was, hey, there's people dying, there's people sick, and we need to get to the bottom of this and get better. That's where my concern was. And I didn't care if you had an R or a D beside your name. I didn't care who you voted for. I just wanted people to get better. But Marjorie Taylor Greene wants to create a spectacle because she has no intention of making things better. She's trying to steer the blame away from who it really falls on. More on that later. And she's trying to entertain these conspiracy theorists and these people that gets behind her and cheers on this insane rhetoric. And this insane rhetoric has caused Dr. Fauci to have his life threatened on multiple occasions. And there has to be a line somewhere that someone crosses, because how can you sit there and get people so inflamed and get people so worked up that they go threaten another person, and somehow you get a pass for that? That makes no sense to me, but that's the world we're living in. And in this next clip, Dr. Fauci talks about the way that he and his family has been treated. Take a look at this.
Caitlin, that whenever somebody gets up, whether it's a news media, you know, Fox News does it a lot, or it's somebody in the Congress who gets up and makes a public statement that I'm responsible for the deaths of X number of people because of policies or some crazy idea that I created the virus, immediately it's like clockwork, the death threats go way up. So that's the reason why I'm still getting death threats. When you have performances like that unusual performance by Marjorie Taylor Greene in today's hearing, those are the kind of things that drive up the death threats, because there are a segment of the population out there that believe that kind of nonsense.
So instead of coming to the table, putting political differences aside, and working on the issues at hand, Marjorie Taylor Greene just decided to muddy the water and create a scene and appeal to the lowest common denominator and get them all riled up to the point that they would go out and threaten Dr. Fauci. It's so despicable that that's where we're at. And this has been a very hard video for me to make, and I'm going to close with why. I saved that part for the end. I had to. You'll see why in a minute. But I want to talk for just a second about why she's doing all of this and why the right does all of this. The Republican Party has become the party of victims. They've become the party of poor, poor, pitiful me. The whole game's rigged against me. Everyone's out to get me. And they create their straw men, their deep state, and their Soros-funded government, and the evil Dr. Fauci. Ooh, they have to do that to deflect from the real reason that COVID was bungled all to hell, and that's Donald Trump. Donald Trump is the one that stood up and told us it'd be over by Easter. He's the one that told us that once it heated up, once it got hot outside, it would go away. The virus hates heat. He's the guy that was caught on audio talking about how that he realized what a threat it was, but he was just going to downplay it. He wasn't going to tell us what it really was. Millions of Americans lost their lives. They can't talk about Trump because he would have to be held accountable, and we know they're not going to hold him accountable. So they have to turn all this hatred toward Dr. Fauci and make him the enemy and make him the boogeyman. That's the whole reason why that she done that shit show. And the reason why it struck such a raw nerve in me, and just bear with me, Back in October of 2021, I lost two family members, a cousin, my first cousin who I grew up with. He felt more like my little brother than he did a cousin. He was special needs. He was a 35-year-old man trapped in an 8-year-old's body. You ever saw the movie Radio with Cuba Gooding Jr.? That was him. And his mom was my aunt. And she was married to a guy who bought into all the bullshit conspiracies that Marjorie Taylor Greene and the Joe Rogans and all the quack doctors he had on his podcast loved to spread. And they were all in bad health, every one of them. Every one were in really bad health. They all had high blood pressure. They all were overweight. They all had diabetes. They had everything in the world wrong with them. I'm not a doctor. But their doctors was telling them, you really need to get this vaccine. You're a candidate for this. You truly need this. We don't think you could beat COVID. And me and my mom and people tried to talk with them and reason with them and tell them, you need to take this. And they wouldn't listen. They quoted back that bullshit that comes out of Marjorie Taylor Greene's mouth. And they all three died within 3 weeks of each other. And me and a cousin went out and buried my cousin and my aunt's ashes by ourselves. And as I lowered them in the ground, I thought, fuck Joe Rogan. Fuck all these conspiracy theorists that got inside people's head. I try to avoid profanity in my videos. Like I use it, but not as much as I do in person. Like when I'm talking with my friends, I drop F-bombs constantly. It's really hard to talk about Marjorie Taylor Greene and this whole thing and not just have a complete, profanity-ridden video. But that's why it strikes a nerve with me. And then here we are all these years later, and instead of finally coming to our senses and putting our differences aside, she just has to go out and stir the pot even worse. And there's people still getting sick. There's people still out there dying, and we forget about that. But I will never forgive those people. I truly don't believe in it, to be honest. I don't think it's a forgivable thing. And so if there's a judgment on the other side, I'll answer for that one. But the idea that this woman represents people in Congress, and the idea that people buys into that rhetoric, again, I want it to be known that I am nowhere in this world affiliated with that side of the aisle at all. So yeah, obviously there's a splice right here in the video, and it's not because I broke down, it's because my iPhone overheated. It's pretty warm here in East Tennessee. And to be dead honest with you folks, I just didn't have a take two in me to say that all again. But I really wish people could set their differences aside and care enough about each other to do better and stay healthy. That would be my hope. And I would hope that more people starts to see through this rhetoric of Marjorie Taylor Greene and realizes that it's not helping anyone at the end of the day. Getting a certain group of people in the world riled up with conspiracy theories is not fixing the problem. And that's what she was elected to do, was work for the people and work on problems. And she never does that. She clearly works for Trump, and she clearly works for their far right agenda. And we just need to really, really stop and ask ourselves, is this where we want to be as a country? Is that the type of people we want to be representing us? And again, I'll be voting as far left as I can because I in no way want to ever be affiliated with the Marjorie Taylor Greenes of this world.